So Jesus will take care of the presentation, okay? This for management.
Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to Design Superpowers for Developers with Wiki Chaves. First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here. I am Jesus Alvarez. I'm here with my fellow partner, Ayub. We're going to host this Lunch and Learn today. We are students at Microverse, which is a coding school where people from all around the world learn to code by pair programming with each other, and the students don't pay anything until they get a job. And if you are wondering what the Lunch and Learn is, it's a weekly event where we bring guest speakers to share their professional journeys and their experiences working on topics such as pair programming, remote work, and open source. So today we're glad to have Wiki Chaves with us. Wiki is a professional designer with over 10 years of experience designing and managing design and product teams. He worked in companies like Lemon Wallet, Lenovo, and Airbnb. So welcome, Wiki. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, guys, and also it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Welcome.
Thanks to you. Would you like to start telling us about how did you get into design?
Sure. So I get into design very early, around 1996, when I was 16 years. I remember one day my dad came from work and he brought his computer from work and he plugged it into the phone line and he did some tricks. And after some minutes and some weird noises, we were browsing the internet. And I remember that very first minute I got like very in love with the internet and with all the possibilities that connection and the endless knowledge would arise. So I remember I was 16 years already, said like I want to do something around here. So around that time I started like doing some basic HTML sites for me, for my friends, for high school. I was in high school at the time. And when I had to choose a profession, I tried to do something like was related to web design. There were at that time in Buenos Aires, where I'm from in Argentina, there were not like any kind of college for doing web design or something like that. There was maybe engineering, but not design. So I studied something like what's called image and sound design. It was a little bit connected to the web design or multimedia design, but it was a little bit more broad too. So after, you want to say something?
No, I say great.
So that was my early hookup with web design and like interaction design. When I finished high school, I started working in different small agencies. I remember my first work was to do like email marketing, and then I started developing Flash sites, and I kept like improving and progressing in that space. And when I really started being a web designer, was something people would say, "What are you doing? What's exactly your job? Are you sure you want to do this your whole life? Are you going to be able to find a job?" And I really liked that. I really liked that, like designing for web. So I kept pushing it. But at that time, I was very uncertain. Like, is this really going to work? But after some years, like more years, like I would start to see like how there was more like a need for a designer, a web designer. So people would contact me for creating their sites, yes, Flash sites, etc. So after some years of working in Argentina, in 2010, I had the opportunity. I saw an application for applying to a job in San Francisco. It was this company that was founded by an Argentinian entrepreneur called Juan Casares, and he was looking for an Argentinian specifically that would move to San Francisco and work with him on product. didn't have any experience working in product or mobile or something like that, but I applied. And after a lot of back and forth interview with him and his team, I got the job and I moved to San Francisco. That was in early 2011. From there, I worked in this company, Lemon Wallet. It was a mobile application. And again, I didn't know anything about mobile application, but I realized pretty much immediately that the whole team had no idea about mobile. So I was kind of relieved that we were all learning how to do it. So my first lesson from Silicon Valley was like mostly like you don't have to have all the knowledge. You can learn a lot by doing and by trying and error, etc. So after kind of 2.5 years working in this company in Lemon Wallet, we started to have some progression of the app. We pivoted one time. We opened a paid product, and after 2.5 years, the company got acquired by an identity theft protection company that's called LifeLock. So I had my first like Silicon Valley experience from start, creating a product, creating a brand, pivoting into a different kind of product from one product to another, introducing a pay plan, seeing all the market growth, market fit, and then getting acquired. So that was a great experience for me. Can you hear me good, or there's a lot of noise? I can move if there's a lot of noise here.
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Since you are bringing the mic close to your mouth, now we are hearing good. Thank you. You can. It was like
maybe like this is better.
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
like
it's
this.
good.
Yeah, that's better.
Perfect. So my next move was to work. I worked for 6 months in this company that acquired us. It was kind of a boring company and a little bit like I imagine like an insurance company, something like that. So it was a little boring. And then I joined another company that it was way more exciting. That it was a Bitcoin company that called Xapo, Xapo. So, and again, we had to do everything from scratch. I was one of the first hires there, and I had to build a team, grow that team of designers. So I was in charge of doing brand, marketing, product design, and everything that touched design. So it was a fantastic opportunity to see everything because I had to build everything. And it was on a field that's like Bitcoin that was very unknown at that time, so it was very challenging too. So it was a great experience. Then I joined an agency. That the agency is original from Argentina. It's called Aerolab. And I changed a little bit my role. Instead of being a lot involved in the product, I was mostly like, instead of being involved in design, I was mostly involved in product development and also a little bit of sales. So my role at the agency the agency is from Argentina, and my role was to bring customers from San Francisco and develop their needs in Argentina. So it was a little bit of mix of sales and product management. I worked there for 1.5 years, but it was tough for me because this role like salesperson was not for me. So I ended up leaving the company. And after that, I started freelancing until I got a freelance job with Airbnb. After 3 months working as a freelancer, they asked me if I wanted to join. Yeah, and after 3 months of working with Airbnb as a freelancer.
Yeah, we do hear you. We do.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. So after 3 months of working with them as a freelancer, I started working as full-time. So I worked there for 1.5 years at Airbnb. I was mostly in charge of the listing page. It's the page where you mostly like see the listing and see the details of the listings, the number of bathrooms, the number of rooms, the number of the photos, reviews, etc. and we would do like small optimizations for that listing page. And it was my very small optimization, and we would test everything there. It was a great experience. So that's my story. Then in March last year, recently, I quit Airbnb and started like a trip. So I'm taking some time off to do this trip right now, where I'm in Thailand right now. So I'm not working anywhere. So yeah, but that's a little bit of my story. Maybe it was a little bit long, but yeah, that's the story.
It's really interesting. We really appreciate for sharing that with us. Thank you, Wiki. So do you want to say something else about your story, or?
So no, in general, I guess you can maybe tell I was on different environments. And first, I worked in education, then I worked in advertising. I worked in technology. So I had all these different experiences and learned a little bit of each one of the moments. What I maybe something that I in common, or I have to always like think what's a key learning of all this story. I always try to say to people like to maybe don't be afraid of trying new things or doing like new things. This, as I was mentioned before, when I joined the first this Lemon wallet company, I didn't know anything about product or design, and I was a little bit afraid, and I learned a lot by doing and by testing and iterating it. So that's one key learning. And something related, I would also like to say is like keep pushing, keep insisting. If something doesn't work, try another approach, a similar approach, but don't like give up. Keep pushing it. I think you will certainly see some good results if you keep insisting and don't give up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now Wiki is going to talk about design tips for developers. So you can start when you're ready, Wiki.
Okay. So we already know a little bit about me and my story. So yeah, I'm a designer, and this is something this is part of my day-to-day life at Airbnb, like a lot of paper sketches, but also it's a lot of like meeting with people, listening to them, talking with PMs, researchers, engineers, business partners, etc. Last year, while I was working at Airbnb, for example, I want to show you some examples of what I was doing. This was the listing page that I was in charge, or my team was in charge, not only me. And we would like make very small changes based on assumptions or hypothesis of what we think we will improve. So as you see, this is how the listing page looked in January 2017. I missed 0 there. So for example, if you compare this January to December, you will see that we change here the icons. Let me see if we can, for example, here, we change the icons, we change this new, let me show you before again, this part, the check-in, check-out, and guest box. If you compare to what we did after, like we clean it up a little bit. Here we change this navigation bar, for example. And those changes are based on a hypothesis. Like we think, for example, if we change these icons, people will see more clearly the idea of this icon, and will recognize that faster, so they will end up clicking here the book button more times. So the book button for us was very important. So if you see like the previous one, you will see like maybe this here, the information is a little bit more fragmented. And if you see here, the information that's a little bit more clear. But in order to do this, we had to test a lot. And these all changes were not pushed at the same time. We will first roll out this version, like with the header. Then we will roll out this version with the new icons. Then we'll roll out this version with the new sidebar. So we will do very small incremental changes and test and everything, and continue iterating. Then there's a follow-up version. This was March this year, and if you see again, there's a little bit changes from here to here. Like we added this categorization, private room in house. I don't remember exactly what it is. We changed a little bit the cancellation and the amenity. We flipped the order. We animated that icons. You can't see it animated right now, but it was not animated, and then we animated. We changed, for example, here the dates and the guest speaker are 2 rows, and we changed it to only 1. It was another thing we test. So these are like all these like small incremental changes and that we will do. And it was the whole year I was working on this page. And what happened, and this is a little bit of context so you know what I was doing. But what happened to me is when I joined Airbnb here in January 2017, I landed I joined a team at Airbnb that was composed of 12 engineers, 1 PM, 1 researcher, 1 data scientist, and only me as a designer. So for reference, the ideal ratio of designers to engineers is 4 or 6 for 1 designer, 4 to 6 engineers for each designer. That's the ideal scenario. So if you think about that, I was serving twice or even 3 times the number of the engineers I should do. So I just was like finalizing my onboarding on Airbnb, and I realized that I'm joining a team with a lot of engineers. Engineers are hungry, they ask you things, they need you, and they were all like requesting me things. So what I thought it was like 3 possible scenarios how to handle that situation. And first situation was, okay, if I have to work with 12 different engineers, I have to work more time, more hours. But I thought like that eventually will like burn me out, and wouldn't eventually affect a lot of my personal life and my life-work balance. So I dismissed that option. The second possibility was to say, okay, I will continue working the same amount of time, and slow down, and the design requests will start accumulating. So that was another option. Like, so that was not my fault that I was serving that amount of like people. So I was like, you know what, I will continue working my hours, and if you have more demand, I'm sorry, I can do it. But that would eventually affect our team, our goal teams. And the third option, I thought it was kind of giving up and letting go. And what it means, letting go, means like instead of me being the only designer of the team, let everybody design on the team. And that doesn't mean like that I was like not doing properly my job. I was like just like omitting my role. It was mostly like enabling the whole team to be designers, and they use their design mindset. So first, what I did was to give like some tips to our engineers, to our 12 engineers. That these are the tips that I'm going to give you right now, and then schedule some once a week designers design office hours where they could come and visit me, and we could like review their wireframes or their proposals or their designs, and I would say, okay, this is ready, let's ship it, or make some changes, or give feedback. So basically what I was doing, instead of saying, okay, I'm a team, we're a 15 people team with only 1 designer, I was saying, okay, we are all designers, we're 16 designers. So that was a big change in the team, and that enabled us to keep working very fast, and in very little time we start seeing how all those ideas that came from engineers got shipped and got positive results. So this is a little bit of the context about this talk. So everything is clear to here. I'm too fast. Any question from this? Should I continue? Okay, I will continue.
Actually, continue.
So
like
before
everything
jumping,
until now, like, we will leave like the question and answer until the end of the.
okay. Okay, yeah, we continue and then we can do the questions.
Yeah.
So before going to these tips for engineers, I wanted to maybe exemplify like 3 different scenarios that I thought that could happen. The first scenario is where you're working on a team and there's no designer. But this is probably what happened to a lot of you students. Maybe you are 2 engineers or only 1. You don't have designer, you don't have design. So that means that you are the designer. So in that scenario, you are responsible for both designing and engineering. So I think it's a great opportunity to learn. And if you follow these simple rules, you would probably deliver a good MVP, minimum viable product. So the second scenario is when there's 1 designer to every 10 developers. That's what happened to me last year. If you face that scenario, your designer will probably or certainly need help. So how can you help? You can keep proposing ideas. You can join her in brainstorming sessions. You can give feedback. And for example, like very little details. Don't expect that everything will come served. So if you don't have specs for any kind of design, you can go grab the source file and check your specs by yourself. And the third scenario is the ideal one. And this is when there's 1 designer to every 4 to 6 developers. So in this scenario, it doesn't mean that you have to fully forget about the design, but this is no longer a concern. I would still recommend you to join the brainstorming sessions and give feedback, especially from your engineer's perspective, but this is not something that you have to concern or worry about. So these are 3 scenarios. The tips I'm going to give you are mostly for scenario 1, where there's no designer, but are applicable for 3 of them. So let's go. First tip. If you want to design and be a designer, you have to think as a designer, right? And when you are a designer, you are not thinking about engineer problems. So that means when you're designing, don't think about, is this performative? How can I optimize the code for this? If this is too time consuming to build. So think about the design, think about the user problem you're trying to solve. Okay. And so, for example, if you had to build a photo uploader feature, don't think about the performance optimization. So think about how is the most effective way a user can upload a picture, a photo. Think about the user motivation to uploading a picture. How this process be straightforward and maybe could be enjoyable. User can enjoy that process. So that's the thing that you have to think when you're thinking as a designer, not the engineer stuff. And for me, it's very important that you differentiate both moments. So imagine you're building this feature, you're designing this feature. So first, think, you can for example, very explicitly split the time of your design where you design and explicitly split the time for development. For example, you can choose an area in your apartment or your office where you do all the design work, and then move physically to a different place and do the engineering part. Or maybe block mornings and work on design only in the mornings, and then work on engineer stuff on the afternoons. So that way you can very differentiate both moments. Now I'm designing because I'm here in the kitchen working as a designer. Now I'm going to move and work on the engineer on my living room, for example. But making that physical change, we can reinforce the idea of like these are two roles that I'm like switching back and forth. Okay.
Okay, so that really helps you to change your mindset.
I think like what I can force you a little bit to change that mindset, especially in the beginning when you're not used to switch this context. But that can force you, but you can do anything that helps to right, force to change that that context. And if it is something physical or something very like delimited, maybe it's better in the beginning, and then with time you can switch back and forth easily. But it's very important. What I try to make clear, it's very important when you're designing, think as a designer and be fully embedded in this like I'm a designer moment, and then you switch to your engineer moment and you're fully engineer and you don't think about design. Because if you start crossing the path, you will end up limiting yourself as a designer or as an engineer. So try to be very conscious about both times. Okay.
Okay, great.
Second tip. When I say build a plan, sometimes what I see is like the same if in other like process sprints. If you like, I used to do WordPress themes and I would like be the designer and the engineer at that moment. So I would have everything in my head and say, okay, I will build it. But before building it, build a plan, right? Build like sketches, wireframes, like grab a napkin and put there right like a few sketches. But have a plan before jumping right straight to the code. Don't go straight from your head to the code. So sit down, wireframe, and when you finalize your wireframes, then review it with your engineer's perspective and see if everything is right. If you miss something, and if probably you miss something, you go back to the wireframes, review your wireframes, correct them, etc., and go back to your engineer mode, and vice versa. So build a plan, have something written, and then when you have the plan, you can go and build it. How can you wireframe? For example, Balsamiq is a good tool for rapid prototyping. But if you want, also you can use Sketch or Figma on your whole design process from wireframe to production. That's mostly what I do. I use the same tool, but if you like, you can use different tools. At the end of this talk, I have a list of links, so I can send you all the links. Don't be too concerned right now about the links. But Balsamiq, Sketch, Figma, or anything that helps is good.
Okay, thank you.
So the third tip is start with a framework. So not having a designer in your team doesn't mean that you have to design everything from scratch. So there's a lot of frameworks you can use as a starting point and then customize your way. For example, Bootstrap is a good framework, or Foundation is another great framework where you have everything, like all components and like already built. But there's a lot of them, so don't get too attached also to frameworks. Choose whatever works for you. If you're building for native, you can follow material design guidelines, and if you are building, if you're building for Android, you can follow material design guidelines, and if you're building for iOS, you can follow a human interface guidelines. So that's very recommendable, and also I have the links at the end of the talk. If you're building for native, also like first limit yourself to the native patterns and the native components, unless you want to build something very unique like Snapchat or a game that you specifically need some unique pattern. So, but if it is a regular application, follow the native patterns, even it looks boring and plain. And after with some time, and when you have fully dominance of those patterns, you can start adding your flavors, your colors, your personality, etc. So start with a framework, go slowly and slowly start customizing your framework, but don't go too crazy in the beginning. So the next tip is about design systems that is related to frameworks. So if you have one design, I wouldn't do this if you don't have designers, but if you have one designer on your team, maybe you can start building your own design system. Design system is mostly like having your framework, like instead of using Bootstrap or Foundation, you build your own framework for your company. This is only recommendable if you really are scaling really fast or you have to maintain multiple applications with the same visual language. Because it's really, really very time consuming. So I wouldn't recommend you do this if you're not like on this situation where you have to scale fast or maintain multiple applications. A good tool for creating a design system is Pattern Lab. It's a tool where you can like put all the code and document everything, all the components and everything on the usage of your components. So it's a great tool where you can install on your server and have everything, all the documentation, examples, and like playground, all there. So this design system is similar to a framework, but for your own company. The next tip, this is about branding. So at this point, you probably you're building something, you have your framework, you started to customize it a little bit. So as you start putting a little bit of color, choosing a different typography, you're starting to build a brand. Okay, so and everything you put, every decision there will affect your brand. So don't feel very intimidated by building a brand. This is something that you can totally do, and it's actually very fun to do. So I think it's a good exercise to sit down one day and say, okay, I have to have a brand, I have to have a logo, I have to have an icon. It's important for your MVP or for your or whatever you're building. So don't feel like, oh no, I'm not a designer, I can't build a brand. Do it. I'm linking a very fun article that a friend wrote about how to make a logo in only 5 minutes. Of course, maybe you can take more time. You can spend half a day or a full day working on your brand if you want. But don't feel intimidated. Anyone can do it. And think about this way. This logo won't set up in stone or won't be there forever. Probably if your MVP is successful or you get more funds, you hire an agency, you will hire a designer, and you will rebrand your product. But start with something. Branding is fun, and you can totally do it. So don't freak out if you have to build a brand. Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Next one is about typography. So after you build your logo, you probably want to start to choose a font family for the rest of your application. So again, I have in my list of links, there's a very good article from Google on how can you choose a web font. But a high level tip is like, depends a lot of what are you building. You will choose different typography. If you are like building a magazine, for example, that you usually have to read a lot, you would maybe find a font that is more readable, a little bit more open. If you are you have to build a game or something that's more playful, you can choose a different font that's a little bit more playful, has more character. But depends on what are you building, you can choose different web font. And here's linked a really good article or how can you choose different fonts. I have also a link for inspiration where you have a list of like most popular fonts, so you can use that as a starting point. And when you choose a font, a common technique is to use a main font and distinctive font for headings, for example, and maybe a secondary font for larger blocks of text. You can do that, like choose maybe a primary font or secondary font, or maybe you can choose only one font. My recommendation would be to keep it very simple. Don't choose like multiple fonts and keep it like simple as possible. I have a link here also where you can have what is called a typography pairing. But typography pairing is similar to wine pairing, for example, when you go and you have this wine is good, pairs good with this type of fruit. So typography has this kind of similarity where, I don't know, Futura has a good pairing with another type of font. So you can get inspired with these links, and you can totally use those links as a starting point. Okay, I like this font combination, like this font pairing. So you can use those ones. Another thing about typography and frameworks is be very conscious about the different size used on your font. Don't get too crazy about like having like many different font sizes on your site or on your app. This will like add complexity then to your framework. Go like, okay, this is a heading, number one, heading number two, heading number three, and then you have the paragraph, and that's it. Keep it simple. And a little bit of detail, like don't use the very small fonts, font sizes. For example, have I have a lot of trouble reading under 16 pixels. When you're younger, you have better vision. And I remember when I was younger, I would like choose like 12 points or 11 points, and looks a little bit more stylish. But there's a lot of people that have trouble like me reading those like small sizes. And last tip about typography. Think about if you have support different languages, that font supports those languages. There are like many fonts that are aimed to support many languages. Like Noto is a font from Google that aims to support languages, but you don't have to use that if you don't have to support those languages. But if you have, be conscious about that.
Okay. Right.
Next one is about color, and this is something that you want to avoid, this color combination. So similar as typography, keep it very simple. Don't choose a lot of colors. Choose one and primary color that will be used for displaying most frequently across your app, and maybe a secondary color that provides an accent color, a distinguished color for your product. So keep it simple. Primary color, secondary color, that's it.
Okay.
For inspiration, also have a list of color combinations that you can see. And there's also a material design color tool where you can play with multiple like color combinations, and you can see the results live on a app simulation. Everything is on the links at the end of the page. So keep it simple. One color for primary, secondary color for accent or for kind of distinguishment. Yeah, keep it simple. And this is something, this screenshot is about something that you really want to avoid. That's color vibration. And color vibration, this happens when two adjacent colors appears to merge, and this kind of vibrating feeling is very hard to be objective with this. I mean, this is clear example of this color is a little bit like kind of hurts your eye, and people will see differently. So try to. I'm linking also a really good article how to avoid this like color vibration issue. But if you see that the color like has some kind of like weird dynamic, and you can kind of say, this is good, this combination. Okay. And last thing about color. Think about accessibility. There are people that can't see color contrast very well, so don't go on like typography is very subtle, super gray, and thin and small, because some people will have issues seeing that, and linking a good tool where you can check the color contrast and the accessibility guidelines, where you can maybe validate if this is okay. And for your MVP, maybe you don't have to be fully compliant with these accessibility guidelines, but maybe some minor adjustments, you can have some degree of compliance, and you can say that your product is a little bit more accessible to some people. And be conscious about that, and be conscious that there are people with some limitations. Like me, for example, the glasses I was telling before, some other people with different, like colorblind or color contrast, etc. So start using those tools, and at least to be conscious about the different limitations. I think it's a good practice.
Okay.
Next is iconography. So icons will help you a lot. Will help you to give some character to your UI and help you in moments where you need to synthesize very complex concepts. An icon also can reduce a lot of space and avoid internationalization problems. So, for example, if you have a very long string and you have problems with internationalizing that string, you can put an icon and then problem is solved. You don't have to translate it. You save a lot of time, etc. But sometimes happens that if you end up using an unclear icon to convey an important action, then you will have a serious problem. So there's a lot of icons that it's hard to understand what it means, and if the user have to guess what that means, you have to have a very serious issues. So if there's any doubt about the icon, you can use text, or you can use an icon with a label right next to it. And again, in the links, I have a set of like different places where you can grab icons. This is one that is very good, the Noun project. Then you have material design icons, and there's another one that's called Streamline icons that they have like over 1 million icons. So there's a lot of sources for free icons and free packs where you can download a lot of icons with the same style and same character. But again, keep it simple. Think about if the icon really helps. If it's unclear, don't use it, or use a label below or right next to it.
Okay, great.
Next one is illustration. Illustrations can help you to support important messages you don't want to get lost. So, for example, I don't know if you know that, but users read at most 28% of the text of your site or app. I mean, generally, I think that users don't read. So having an illustration here on these messages can help a little bit digest that content a little bit better. And if you can do a small animation, maybe it's a little bit better. This one, I don't know what happened with the slide.
I think we lost connection with Wiki. We will wait a few seconds to see if we can reconnect.
Hello? Hello, hello?
Well, hi, Wiki. Can you hear me?
No, what happened? Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Right.
So I was saying, if you have in this moment, the normal moment would say like, okay, it's a boring moment, I send an email, and now you have a monkey that gives you a high five, and it's a delightful moment. So this can help you digest that content better and even make it enjoyable. I think about your situation where you are engineers and students, and probably it's hard for you to design an illustration. So in this case, it's hard to find a place where you can find a good illustration that fits your need. But there's always places like Dribble, for example. You can search for free illustrations, or there's other sites, and you can Google it like free illustrations, and maybe you can find something that you need. And it's not if you have budget or resources in the future, you can hire an illustrator. So that's up to you. And in short, like you can like try to find a free illustration, or you can hire an illustrator.
Okay.
Next one is photography. In my particular experience, when I build a product, I always like to have a folder, and I call it product in use. And as I build the product, I will start thinking about situations where I can see where my users like get benefits from the product that I'm designing, and try to have photos from those scenarios and from those moments. So for example, if you're creating an application that helps you reduce the time you spend on your phone, maybe you want to have a set of photos of people having outdoor activities or spending time with their families. Okay, you don't want to be on the phone because you're trying to spend time with not with your phone. So when you have that folder, you have a lot of examples, and they have a lot of pictures of uses of your product having benefit of using it, and then you can start using to merchandise your product. For example, on your landing page, on your onboarding tour, your social media, and your press release. Be very consistent with the image you use, and the style, and the tone, and the age group, because this will for sure influence on your brand. Good places for having like good images for free and Unsplash. You have a lot of images for free, and they're really good quality. And then there's another site that's called Placeit, where you can put a screenshot of your app, and it will like render it on a phone or in context where you have like, I don't know, someone like checking their phone with a green screen, and you put your mockup, and it will renderize, and you will have a result is a picture of a hand browsing your application. Now, it's very important. Like photos is a good way to convey the value, so you can use photography for that. So next tip, we're getting there. Prototyping. So prototyping is something that you can do depending on your stage or flow. You can prototype very early on your wireframe stage, or later when you have a little more your product done. But something that you can, it's very easy to prototype. There's a lot of tools for doing that. A good tool that I use is called InVision, where you can like link different images, and like as you see here with like arrows and transitions, and then it will also renderize it as a prototype, where you can like kind of looks like a real product, and you can use that prototype later for user testing, or just by yourself, and to check if that interaction that you're building is okay. So Vision is a good tool for doing that. Framer is another good tool for prototyping that is expanding every day its capabilities beyond prototyping. So you can use any tool. My recommendation would be also like, don't get very attached to these tools, because these days are like many prototyping tools, and people like get super fun about those. Like at the end of the day, whatever works for you is good. And don't get too attached to the tool, and use it only if you see necessary. And don't be like a prototyping fan.
Okay. Like, how important do you think is to prototype before starting a product?
Depends. I mean, in your case, where you are designer and developer at the same time, you can, maybe it's faster for you to just build the app and test it. So I don't think it's really necessary in your scenario, unless you want to test something more like prototype, I don't know, maybe you're prototyping something more complex, or like an animation or a transition. In that case, maybe you can prototype. But if it's just a simple flow, if it is faster for you to build it, just build it. But yeah. I like to prototype because I don't have developing skills. So for me, it's way faster to just link those mockups and test it by myself. But that depends on you. I wouldn't say it's super important, but it's useful, but it's not something like key to the process.
Okay.
The next one is user testing. So by now you have either like a product or a prototype that you're excited to test. You don't need to test it with a lot of people. Only 5 users is more than enough. Even 3 is okay. So don't get very complex. Oh, I need to test it with 15 or 20 people. Like only 5 is okay, or 3. And you can validate like different things, and this testing will give you very early insights about what's working and what's not. So if you have budget, you can use a tool like usertesting.com. You can send a task and your prototype or your product to a set of users, and they will do the tasks, and they will record everything, and they give you the videos. But if you don't have that budget, you can do your own testing, recruiting their family members or friends, as long as you keep it very objective. Don't because I have seen like users testing with friends that end up being like having beers and like be very like, okay, I'm doing something serious, and like be like put it on, be serious in this. Before starting your test, take some time to identify what questions you are trying to get answers through this user testing. Okay, what do you want to learn from this testing? Because you will have to give them your users a task. So what task should I give them? And a very cheap way to test is what is called a thinking aloud test. So it's most like letting your users simply verbalize their thoughts as they move through the interface after you give them a task. So you give a complete design of flow. So, okay. And the user will say, okay, I'm here on the screen. I have to put my email, I have to put my password, and probably will ask you, what happens if I click the forget my password link? Please don't tell them the answer. So hold on and say, be quiet and say, what would you expect to happen? So, oh, I would expect to receive an email with my password or a link. Where should I click? Okay, and you take notes, but don't give them the answers, because if you give them the answers, you won't learn from their experience. Sometimes what it helps is to have a third person right next to you taking notes, because if you're moderating, it's very hard to moderate and take notes at the same time. You can also, if you don't have a third person, you can like put a camera and record the session, or as in this photo, this is a kind of a device for recording mobile testing. So it's pretty cheap to buy it, and also you can do it by yourself with something. I don't know with what, but probably you will find a way to have something like this. It's handful to have everything recorded, because at the moment you're moderating, maybe you're not paying a lot of attention to the details, and then you can watch the videos later. This should be very cheap or free, so there's no limitations for doing this. You can use your friends, your other students. I don't know, or whatever you find. Like it shouldn't be a limitation to doing this. Almost done. Finally, when you launch your product, so you already pass through choosing your framework, branding, typography. You choose your colors, you choose your icons, your illustrations, your photography. You did the user test, and you launch. And remember, design is never done. So it's not like, okay, I'm done with design. You just launch your first version. You're going to learn a lot from launching your first version. So grab those learnings and go back to wireframing, go back to prototyping, go back to user testing, and and keep iterating because this is never done. This is like you just push milestones, but this is never done. So these are my tips that can help you. And I also added like a little bit of other. I don't know if you want to go to the questions. I think it's going to be probably the best. And I think I share you. These are a little bit of like design. And in the scenario, if you're working with designers, how can you make a designer happy? But I can send you this. We only have 5 minutes. And yeah, and these are all the links. I will share this presentation with everything. But yeah, I would like to see if there's questions or you have your own from your own experience. If you have tips that can help other students here, yeah, let me know what you think.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Wiki. I'm sure that all the useful tips are going to be very handy for all of us.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you,
Thank you
man.
very much.
You're welcome.
It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
So, like, some questions from the start with the question and answers. So you can
Yeah, so we have a question from Kuro. He's asking, how do you use user data in your design process?
So user data, for example, when I was working at Airbnb, user data was very important before making any design. Before doing anything, you have to have user data. So user data can come in different ways, like on a presentation where you have everything synthesized. For me, it's very hard as a designer to read like a database. And there's people that can do queries and you do read directly those that user data straight from the database. For me, it's very hard. So I would work with a researcher and a data scientist to like kind of digest that information. I would like give you a presentation with all the insights, and at the end you say, I don't know, we will like, for example, going back to the listing page, they will see, I don't know, 20% of the users are not saving their homes. How can we increase that flow, for example? And it will like give you a little bit of that information digested. And then you have the problem, these 20% of the users, and you have the problem is based on user data. It's not based on any kind of assumption that I made. So that was a flow at Airbnb. And every time I had a question regarding user data, I will ask my researchers or data science partners, and they will grab the information for me. So at Airbnb was very simple. I was not simple, but it was very like polished, that flow where data is available and you can go and do your query and get it. And if you don't know how to use the tools, you can ask someone.
Okay, great.
No, great. Yeah, it was a great question by Coral. Thank you, Coral. So we're moving to the next question.
Yeah.
So Jesus.
Yeah, so Emil is asking, do you use a color picker tools to find color combinations?
I don't, but there on the links here, I think I put it. There's one. I don't know if I put that color combination ideas. This is not like a color picker, but this link has like some examples. And there's a tool that is called Adobe Wheel. Where you can use a color picker and like find like different combinations. But I don't. I must like put a primary color and then I try to match the combination.
Okay. Yeah. You have a lot of experience, right?
Yeah. Sometimes intuition is part of accumulation of previous experience. So at this point, I have intuition. Sometimes it's good to have more like a technical. I like the way of having a little bit more technical certainty about this combination is good because of accessibility, color contrast, etc. It's good to only not base everything on your intuition, but have a picker tool that helps you. So it's a valid point.
Okay. So thank you, Emil, for the question. We also have another question from Kuro. He's asking, can we get a copy of your slides? They will be very helpful.
Yeah, I have it here. Q&A. I posted as a question. Can we get a copy? Answer, sorry.
Had like his, you saw you can download
I think I just
from his
posted.
Dropbox.
The Dropbox link.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Wiki.
Dropbox links in the search.
Also, Emily. Emil is asking, should you start your project with a design system?
So I would say like I would start with a framework. The design system usually is a proprietary framework for a company. So if you're starting a project, probably you start with a framework. And if it is a small project, I wouldn't start thinking about the design system. I would start about the design system if a project grows on a level where you need to support it and you need to support many applications. But for starting small and easy, just use a framework like Bootstrap or Foundation. That would be way easier to use rather than a design system.
Okay, great. Thank you. The last question is from Prithviraj. He's saying, I am a full stack freelance developer, but I don't consider design for my apps or websites. I will like get into designing. Your points were very helpful. Is there any course or tutorial to pick up designing fast?
My recommendation would be I don't know any course or tutorial. My recommendation to be like use these tips and do it. So start designing and learn by doing. And sit down and start like if you're already an engineer, probably you need some designs. Try it and do it by yourself, and you will learn.
Okay, thank you. So, excellent. So one more time, thank you very much, Wiki, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm sure we all will learn a lot with you and your experience.
Sure. I'm glad that this worked. Yeah, I have. Sorry?
Oh yeah, Kevin Wahan has another question. So, what's the best strategy to use when refactoring user interface for an existing application?
Yeah, that's very difficult. Refactoring, or as we call rebranding, are very difficult. So I don't know. I mean, maybe refactoring UI is more like a technical thing. I don't exactly know the answer, but maybe you can do it component by component. But it's hard. I don't know the good response. I see, for example, yesterday I was watching Google Maps, and it looks like they're refactoring their UI, and you can see blocks that have the new UI and blocks that don't have the new UI. So I don't have a good. Sorry, I don't have a good answer on this. It's very complex and it's always chaotic. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe componentize everything as much as possible, and work on refactoring blocks of components. That maybe is a solution, but I don't know. Maybe also keep a log of what have the previous UI and what have the new UI. So you have at least you know where you're showing old UI versus new UI, and you're aware of that. But yeah, it's very painful. I have seen this, and there's not good response for this. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Kevin, by the way, is like one of Microverse is sharing.
Okay, so there are no more questions.
Yeah, so thank you guys for attending this session. Thank you, Wiki Chaves, for like giving us your time. We hope like we can meet sooner. Like like to all of your questions, guys, and you can contact him every time you need. Thanks. So Kevin, say thanks for response, Wiki.
You're welcome. Sorry for not
This was-
having the right answer.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah. Oh, don't worry. Like, it's a hard question. So,
As he said, like,
thank you.
Okay, guys. Yeah. See you.
Okay. See you, Wiki.
See you on the internet.
So
I have
guys,
my contact information here, and
yeah,
Thank you,
you can
Wiki.
here on
okay.
Twitter. Thank
Bye
you.
bye,
Here
guys.
recording.
Bye,
Guys, you can watch this webinar channel. So we have some previous webinars where we hosted professional developers. Great topics. You can view them for like attending this session with you. So we will meet you so in the next week. Thank you, Jesus. You can stop the recording right now.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.